What happens if you're solving the wrong problem? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Jill from the Northwoods. I'm talking about how I got myself out of the ditch in life. It wasn't that my life was bad, just was going nowhere. I wasn't getting anywhere, I wasn't fixing anything. I seemed to have the same problems over and over again, year after year. And so I just combined a list of the things that I worked on that got myself out of the ditch. And today it was trying to figure out what is the correct problem to solve. And the biggest problem is that I would try to solve things, but it was not related to the thing, or it wasn't the right way to solve the problem I was having. And so you're not going to get anywhere. If your car is broken and so then you start working on the brakes, but it wasn't the brakes that was the problem with the car in the first place, sure, you might have new shiny brakes, but what good is it? I tried everything I could to solve various problems in my life. I had financial problems, I had weight problems, I had problems getting things done, I had problems just knowing what it is I wanted to do with my life. I could have gone to grad school, and I had a free ride to go to grad school. I wanted to get married, have kids, I could have gone that direction. And then I ended up in a direction that I pretty much got to by default because I didn't get married and I didn't go to grad school. This was like me just getting jobs and trying to figure out how to pay my bills over time. But let's just take even the weight loss issue. I have a whole channel right now about how I'm trying to lose weight and it's working for the first time in my life. I have tried everything. I had Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers, there's all sorts of different programs and attempts I made to do it. I got into exercise programs. I bought exercise equipment. And to me, I kept going down the wrong path because I wasn't really solving what was the correct problem. Part of my problem now is I got myself into diabetes and metabolic syndrome. So now this was a problem I could no longer solve. And in some ways, it became easier for me because there was not a lot, even though some things I could do about it because now I'm in a pickle. But back in those days, I used to buy myself, let's put it, gym equipment. Bought gym equipment all the time. Oh, if I had a treadmill, I bet you I would work out. Oh, if I had a rowing machine, I bet you I would work out. Oh, if I had a set of weights, I really always liked lifting weights. Maybe if I had a set of weights, I would work out. And so I was solving the problem that I didn't have. It wasn't the fact that I didn't have equipment, but now that I took all that equipment, took a spare bedroom, put gym flooring in, and created a whole gym, now it's kind of nice that I have all this equipment. But that wasn't the problem. The problem is how do I get myself to do something I'm not particularly interested in doing? And so I was solving a problem I didn't have. So I spent a lot of money and ended up frustrated every single time after that. Got a new rower, never used it. Got the new treadmill, didn't use it. Got the exercise bike, hangs up clothes very nicely. And suddenly I'm like, why didn't this work? Why didn't these problems work? And so the very first thing that you have to do is you have to sit down and think, what problem do I actually have that I'm trying to solve? And I think that we spend a lot of energy trying to solve problems in the wrong way. We think, oh, if I could just talk to someone about my parents and how awful they are to me, that would solve my problems. But if you're 40 years old and your life isn't going anywhere, is it your problems that you got from your parents that is still haunting you? Or is it something else? Is it something that's happening to you right now? And once I started to figure out how to solve the right problems, I started getting places with my problems that I had. And so, first of all, the easiest thing that you should do when you're trying to figure out what problem it is that you're trying to solve is define the problem clearly. The problem is that a lot of times, is that we say, I want to lose weight. Okay, it's very generic, but it's hard to solve because there's so many things that goes into losing weight. It has to do with how much you eat, the quality of the food you eat, how much you move on a day-to-day basis. Are you exercising? Do you have any muscles at all? There's a number of problems in there about why you may not be losing weight. Do you have too much glucose running around in your body, which is generating too much insulin? There's all sorts of issues that people have. So instead, you have to figure out what it is you're trying to do. Now, in my case, I didn't really eat that much. That was the funny thing about it is I had a roommate, and she's my best friend still today, eats a lot more than I eat. But she's active all the time. But in my head, I was like, if I could just eat what she eats because she's healthy and she's thin, I could lose weight. Wasn't true at all. The question is how could I get myself, instead of sitting on the couch all the time, how could I get myself to move just a little bit? But instead of having this big globular type of problem that you're trying to solve, try to define it. In my case, if I had taken a look and I sat down for a little bit, I would say, Jill, you sit an awful lot. And when you sit an awful lot, you kill off any muscles you have, you don't burn any calories, and you just are kind of a big lump. And so now I have a problem to solve. How can I get myself to move? But there you go. So ask yourself the question, what exactly is wrong? What is going wrong? What's the number one thing that you could do to make this better? And when does that happen? When does it not happen? And what tends to be the barriers in my way? Why am I not doing it? Now, think about my financial problems. When I was poor, one, I did not make very much money at all. Two, I spent money, but you know the funny thing? It was all nickel and diming myself to death. It was not I never bought expensive jewelry or expensive clothes or a fancy car or a fancy house. I never did any of that. But instead, when I sat down and tried to figure out what was going wrong, which came through in the means of a quick, easy, back of the envelope type of budget, I saw what was happening. I was spending so much money on miscellaneous things, it was killing my budget. And then the other problem was, in the end, I didn't make enough money. That's how I ended up solving a lot of my problems, is how can I position myself to get into a career that pays better? And so now it was the very first thing that I had to do. Once I identified the problems, now I could go on and figure out how to solve them. And so then the question is the 5 whys. Simon Sinek wrote a book about the whys you want to do what it is you're trying to do. And his idea behind the 5 whys is that you'll say something, why do you want the thing that you want to do? Well, I want to lose weight. Why? I want to be healthy. Why? Well, because I'm not getting any younger, and I see how sickly people can get when they get older and overweight and no cardio energy in them at all. Why? Because I don't want to end up as an older person, sick, unable to do anything, and I finally get into my retirement years, I finally have all the time in the world, and I can't do what I wanted to do. Ooh. And so now you finally got to it. So the 5 whys, in one sense, helps me clarify my goals of why I want this thing, and now I have a reason. I'm not getting younger, and if I don't lose weight now, when am I going to do it? And if I don't do it, I'm going to end up a person who is retired without any ability to do the things I want to do. Then the other side of it, the 5 whys, is what's going wrong and drilling down to the root cause of my problems. I never lose weight. Why? Well, because I never really burn off any calories. Why? Well, because I sit in my chair all the time. Why? Because I tend to like hobbies, knitting, reading, watching TV, doing computer stuff. That tends to be in a chair. Why? Well, I think it's probably because the other way around, I actually like sitting in a chair, and I found myself hobbies that are there. Okay, great. Now I know something. It's not that I have all these hobbies that put me in the chair. I put me in the chair, and then I found hobbies that support it. What if I found some new hobbies that got me out of the chair? Like hiking, like bird watching, like going on my bike, camping. At least I'm sitting outside in nature. I'm more likely to get up and do something. The next part of it too is look at your patterns, not just sort of one event. We tend to, I think, get frustrated, right? We go, oh, I'm just never going to save money. I just blew money on a new computer. And you take this one event and you lament about that event. And instead, looking at the reoccurring problems will help you a little bit better. And so you can do something like keep a journal, keep the likeliest ways of how is your spending today? I spent money on a big item. I spent lots of money on little items. I didn't spend any money at all, or I had automatic processes spending money for me, like subscriptions and other types of things that just draw automatically from me. Now we can start seeing what's going on a reoccurring basis. I mean, obviously, buying a new computer is not great for your budget if you don't have the money for it, but it probably isn't what's sinking you. Probably what's sinking you are your day-to-day habits, your monthly habits, your yearly habits. Now, if I go and I buy a computer every year or every 2 years, whether I need one or not, maybe that's a habit I have to start looking at. And maybe that pattern, that reoccurring thing is causing me woe. Think about it in losing weight. I noticed that when I was working in the office, I would drive home in a certain way, and Outback steak was right there. And steak is my favoriteest food on the planet. And so I would go, I'm really tired. Maybe I should just get something at Outback Steak, and that way I can just bring home some dinner and I don't have to worry about cooking it. Well, now I just blew 2 problems. Now, every Friday, I was going to Outback Steak. Cost a ton of money, more than what I would cost if I just made dinner at home. 2, it's not healthy for me. It had a lot more salt, it had a lot more calories, it had a lot more carbs, it had a lot more butter than things that I was eating on a normal basis. And so now I blew not only my budget, but my diet, and it was because I was driving home in a certain way. I started looking at that pattern and started going the other direction to go home. And now that I was no longer driving past Outback Steak, I stopped eating there. So sometimes looking at a pattern can help you with that. It also didn't help that I didn't do what they call paying yourself first. I would look up the balance in my bank account and say, oh, well, I can afford a computer. Look at all this money I have there. Instead, then I created a sub-account, and every time that I had long-term expenses, it would go into the sub-account, and then I could look at my money more realistically. So looking at patterns helped me too. The other part of it is that you can try to get some outside help. If there's a counselor, a life coach, a friend who has a good perspective on it, try to have them help you figure out what's going wrong. Sometimes it helps to have someone outside of your life look at your life and help you with it. We're just in too much in the weeds of our own lives to really see what the issues are. I did that with my best friend. I said, I don't know, I'm always broke. And she said, well, it seems to me like we go to Target or we go here and there, and you'll walk out of there with $200 worth of stuff, miscellaneous things. If you could cut that down, you'd probably do a lot better. And she was absolutely right. Once I started looking at the miscellaneous or the cash category, there was my problem right there. Then the next part of it is trying to figure out what the cause of the symptoms are. Sometimes when we look at trying to fix a problem, we are looking at the symptom of the problem and not what the causes of the problem are. So if I see that I overeat every Friday, that's a symptom. The cause is I'm driving by Outback Steak and I ordered something. If I'm spending too much money, it was because back in the day, I took out too much cash and cash just sort of fell out of my fingers like water. I couldn't keep control of it. And so I stopped getting cash. I stopped going places with my credit card and only had one that was useful for emergency situations. So you have to figure out too, what is exactly the cause of the problem and not the symptom. In my case, when I was looking at overeating, this was something that was a relatively new breakthrough. And it happened because I'm doing this podcast and I'm talking about ADHD issues at the beginning. I realized I don't know why I overeat. I'm not that person who goes and buys a box of cookies and eats the box of cookies. I don't make a cake and eat the whole cake. I never do that. But I had problems with impulsivity. Now, my friend, who also is in the same bucket as I am, she said that, and I'm like, I think you're right. ADHD people tend to have problems with impulsivity. More like, I should get a cookie. I should go make a steak. I should go cook this. I should go cook that. Instead of having a plan of how my day was going to go. Now, for the most part, my day's eating is planned out ahead of time and no longer impulsive. Some of that has to do with the Mounjaro I'm taking. It cuts away from those impulsive voices in your head. They're gone. And so now I can be much more methodical about my eating. I remember during my Six Sigma, one of the examples they gave was a hospital that was getting very bad reviews from the patients that were going into the emergency room. And they couldn't figure it out. They said people were really nice to them. They had a good reputation of solving problems and helping people. They couldn't figure out what was going wrong. So they did a root cause analysis where they gave out cards to people. And they found out that the wait time was so long, the waiting room was so uncomfortable, and there was not even a glass of water they could get, that people were getting frustrated before they even ever saw someone. So the idea is finding those root causes will help you get to the real problem that you're having right then. Again, I thought my root problem was I didn't have gym equipment. My root problem was I have to figure out how to make myself do something I don't want to do. And through the course of time, I figured out how to do that. But that was the root problem. Then the next part of it is trying to figure out, too, what can you control and what can't you control? So there are things that you have in your ability. Could I get a job that paid more money? I could. I absolutely could. But it also took effort on my part. I couldn't do it instantaneously. So it was within my control to start taking classes on certain computer issues. If your career is stalled because you work at a company where the boss just doesn't like you, will never promote you, and you're never going to get anywhere, that part is out of your control. There's nothing you can do about it. The thing you can control is getting a new job, going someplace else, figuring out what it is you want. Ask that boss point blank, I would like to be in this position. And when they say no, if they say no, now you have your next solution. You can go on and do something else. I brought it in, and I might redo this a little bit later, is I went to Al-Anon when I was a kid, which is what they send kids to for help with alcoholic families. The Serenity Prayer was based on a prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. When I heard that, at that point, and I was very young, I was still in the military base, so I was under 12 years old, but I realized there's two buckets in life, things I can control and things I can't control. And if I can put everything in those two buckets, that will help me quite a bit. So part of it is I had problems sleeping. I have some sort of circadian clock problem with me because when I went to Hawaii for work, I slept great. That time zone worked really well for me. California time zone worked really well for me. But working in the Midwest and the Central time zone, I could never fall asleep. I could never get there. So what can I affect? Can I affect my circadian clock? Probably not as easily as you think you can. But what can I affect? And so I started working on the things I could change. Same thing with my weight. Once you get into a certain size weight, you're going to have troubles losing weight because now you got yourself into a pickle. But what could I control? I can control how much food goes in my mouth. I can control the quality of the food that goes in my mouth. I stopped eating processed foods, for the most part, a long time ago. Now I eat things that you would recognize on a farm. I look at the labels. Are these ingredients in English? Do I understand what they are? So I started changing the things I could control. For my sleep problems, I started changing the things I could control. And that way you don't get into solutions. It was helpful to me as a kid because I couldn't get my dad to stop drinking. No matter how much I tried, I couldn't get him to stop drinking. But what I could do is ensure that he never pushed my buttons. What I could do was to make sure that my schoolwork was impeccable enough so I could go to college and get out of this whole mess. What I could do was tell him, I'm not going to be a part of this. You might make us all part of your alcoholic world. I'm not playing this game anymore. I'm not involved in this. And that helped me a lot become my own person. The other thing, too, is as you're trying to solve and fix the right problems, is try a minor test of things. Someone wants to start a restaurant. I want to start a new restaurant. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a second mortgage on my house. I'm going to get investors. I'm going to do all these things that I'm trying to do. And then I buy a restaurant and then I find out I don't like being in a restaurant. You could disrupt your entire life trying to follow certain dreams or goals that you have. And instead, if you want to see if you're really solving the problem or really getting to the goal you want to get to, what you do is try a minor experiment. So instead of buying a restaurant, could you work in a restaurant? Tell the boss, I'm just looking for a summer job. I know you're busy in the summer, and then try it out. See what you think of it. Tell the owner even that I'm thinking about starting my own restaurant, and I just want to see what the world of owning a restaurant is like. Or even going and interviewing someone who owns a restaurant. You'd be surprised that if you ask someone, hey, I am interested in starting my own restaurant, won't compete with you, it's going to be on the other side of town. Could I just take you out for coffee sometime and ask you what your day-to-day life is? If you can do things in small steps, little tiny experiments, then maybe you'll see if that is the type of career change you're looking to have. So little tiny experiments will help to see if you're solving the problem as compared to doing something and jumping in both feet and then find out you're not really solving the problem of maybe a life goal or something like that. For example, instead of me going and buying a bunch of gym equipment, I could have bought myself a 6-month gym membership and just see if I have all the available gym equipment to me just down the street at the gym that's really close to my house. Do I exercise? The answer would have been no, I don't. So then I would have gotten a clue. I don't have an equipment problem. I have a problem somewhere else. And then instead, too, try to see that you can rely on data. We talked before about having a checklist, but actually keeping a full-blown journal on what went right, what went wrong, how did I use my time, how did I spend my money, did I exercise today, why not? And that's actually what I started doing, is I started writing this journal of why not. Did you save money today? No. Why not? What happened? What went wrong? Did you exercise today? Why not? What went wrong? And so instead of just feeling my vibe was I didn't have equipment, or my vibe was I don't understand why I'm so broke all the time, now I had clear data because of this journal that would help me see exactly what it is was going wrong. It's also how I fixed my sleeping problems, is I started keeping a sleep journal about what went wrong in the previous night's sleep, and I started solving it. For example, something kept waking me up at 3 in the morning every night. So I would stay up till 2 in the morning because of my circadian clock problem. And then at 3 o'clock every morning, I would wake up. What was waking me up? So one time I set my alarm to about 2:55, and I sat there looking for something that was waking me up. And it turned out I have a water softener, and it makes a good deal of noise, and it kicks on every night at 3 in the morning. I switched the time around, and suddenly, perfect. Now it's not waking me up anymore. So having data will help you do it. Then the other situation is thinking about your future you. When you look back at this situation, if you said, 20 years from now, I'm going to look back at Jill's weight. What really stopped me from losing weight? And you'll start seeing patterns because you're sort of imagining this future you. What got in the way? What didn't I do? Now, also, what is my life like? Because 20 years ago, Jill didn't lose the weight, didn't get in shape, or didn't get on the budget and didn't start saving money. Now I don't have any money in retirement, and now I'm in trouble. The other type of thing you can do instead of future you, think about an imaginary best friend. So your imaginary best friend is trying to give you advice on this situation. And this works remarkably well when all things are considered. So if I went to my imaginary best friend and I say, hey, Sally, I just don't know why I don't have any money anymore. Well, you know why you don't have any money. Every 2 years you buy a computer. You nickel and dime yourself there. You also don't make very much money. Even if you saved every dime of every amount of income you had, once you take away the mandatory bills, there's not a lot left over. Oh, that's my problem. All right, there we go. And the other part of it is that when you're looking to solve all of your problems and figure out what it is you're exactly going to solve, sometimes it helps to look at what does it cost you if I were not going to solve this? Now, in some cases, like let's say my backyard. I'm not much of a gardener. I'm not much of a backyard person. My backyard gets unruly all the time. What would happen if in 5 years I didn't solve the problem of my unruly backyard? Well, actually nothing. Nothing would happen. As long as I keep it at levels where the city doesn't get involved or my neighbors don't get disappointed in me, actually Nothing happens if my backyard is not amazing. And I'm not going to deal with it. But if I don't get my finances in shape, maybe I don't retire. Or maybe I end up losing a job and losing the house because I had no savings to back myself up when I didn't have a job. If I don't lose weight, what's going to happen? Well, I'm going to get more diabetic. I'm going to get sicker. My knees are going to hurt. And then by the time I retire, I won't be able to walk and go hiking and do all the things that I really love doing. So now I can actually see which problem I need to solve based on what the future me looks like, what the 5 years, the 10-year version of me looks like. Now I know which things are going to have an impact. And the other way that you can look at solving problems when you're not sure quite what it is that you need to solve is look at other people who had similar issues to you. How did they solve the problems? How did they get out of this situation? And there are great books out there. That's how I started my podcast. I talk about books that got me out of the ditch. But I started, for example, reading books about people who had procrastination issues. Now, if you're a procrastinator, you get called lazy all the time. And it's disappointing. And then you feel bad about yourself. And then if you found out, oh, it's not about me being lazy, it's about the fact that I don't prioritize and I try to do everything and then nothing gets done. And so you can find out great books. You can find out people who are just like you. I read that ADHD book by Penn Holderness, and I saw a guy who took his creativity, his ADHD superpowers, and turned it into a whole creative vibe he has going for himself. So trying to fix the problem that you really have, the right problem, the real issue, you only have so much time, so much money, so much frustration level, so that if you can figure out exactly what it is you need to fix, this will help you focus on the first thing that you need to fix. I always look at it like this, and in the end, how I got over this kind of issue is I asked myself, what is the one thing I could change in this situation that would have the biggest impact? For me, getting more exercise. Hands down, the most important thing in my weight loss. For money, it was getting rid of automatic spending. I didn't realize how much was coming out of my paycheck before I even spent a dime at a store. So whatever it is. And so once I solved the problem of the automatic spending, now 6 months later, I could say, okay, now what is the most important thing I can change that would have the biggest impact? That's how I solved my sleeping problems. So I hope that helps. Those are ways that I got myself out of the ditch of problems because, again, this kind of is the pivot of everything else. If I can't solve the right problems, I will never solve any of the problems I have. So identifying the right problem at least is the first step. Isn't that in AA? Acknowledging you have a problem is the first step to getting over your problem. Well, figuring out what that is actually the very first step. You don't know what your problems are, you won't know what the solutions are. You won't have any sort of way to figure them out. So spend a lot of energy in identifying the actual problems you have. All right, everyone, thanks so much. I appreciate you watching this. Please remember to subscribe and tell a friend. If you have any comments, if you have ideas, if you have ways that you've been able to figure out how to solve your own problems, let me know. I'd love to hear them. I'd love to hear from you about some of the biggest problems you have too. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, A Better Life in Small Steps has all my podcasts. I have another YouTube channel called Small Steps with God. Right now what I'm doing is the entire Bible, starting in the New Testament, 1 chapter 3 times a week. A slow roll through the Bible. If you're interested in any of that, I'd love to have you watch. Thanks so much. Have a great day.